California's Gold is produced in association with KCET Los Angeles and is seen statewide on California Public Television. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association.
Boy, this is gonna be fun. This music is setting the stage for what promises to be a very exciting afternoon. I'm standing here, we're in San Pedro with two of my new friends, Steve and John. And John, you are dressed for what? What era are you? Who are you?
That's right, Huell. I'm dressed as a soldier as part of the 3rd Coast Artillery stationed here at Fort MacArthur at the outbreak of World War II.
All right, now Fort MacArthur, that's where we are, and this used to be a huge gun emplacement, didn't it?
That's right. Washington wanted every major harbor to be defended, and Fort MacArthur was our fort to defend the harbor and city of Los Angeles.
Okay, so this was a big deal. Fort MacArthur, there were guns all around here, anti-aircraft guns.
That's correct. You're actually at Battery Osgood Farley National Register site. So this is one historic site, and it's only one battery of Fort MacArthur's armament.
How many guns would have been here?
Well, it's very difficult to pin those down because there were so many mobile guns, but there are at least 3 major batteries up on this hillside built during World War I. Then in World War II, they built another one, and then they had several mobile batteries all throughout this hillside.
There was a lot of activity here.
A lot of activity. This was a huge, huge facility.
Well, there was a lot of activity here during World War II. There's a lot of activity here today.
Yes.
And that's what we're going to do. We're going to spend the afternoon here at Fort MacArthur. We're going to go back in time and not only visit this site, but talk about a very interesting date, an event or non-event as far as LA history is concerned. That's what this adventure is all about. There they are right there. They're getting us in the mood for our afternoon at Fort MacArthur in San Pedro. The tour of Fort MacArthur begins, and Steve, it is dark down here. Where have you brought us?
Well, Huell, Fort MacArthur is made up of a series of gun batteries that have these enormous underground complexes, and you're just visiting one of them. What you saw up above ground is nothing compared to what's underground down here.
So there's a whole series of these tunnels underground. What would have been going on down here?
Well, down here, actually, we're walking through a passageway just to get from one gun to the next gun. But behind us, there are several rooms that would have had gunpowder and shells and equipment to service these enormous guns.
How big a place was this?
Well, you know, we're just looking at one battery, as I said, but Fort MacArthur, or Harbor Defenses of LA, stretches from Santa Barbara to Bolsa Chica. And if you go up and down the coast, you will find smaller emplacements like this all the way up and down from, like I said, from Orange County to Santa Barbara.
So this was all known as LA Harbor?
HDLA, Harbor Defenses Los Angeles.
And Fort MacArthur was the headquarters for all of these gun emplacements from Santa Barbara down to Bolsa Chica.
You got it.
And how many people would have been stationed here during World War II?
Well, you know, at peacetime garrison's going to be about 2,000 men, which is almost one regiment. But after the outbreak of hostilities, Fort MacArthur grew to 30,000 men in 2 months.
Right here?
Right, throughout this area. And there were no increase in administrative staff whatsoever. So you can imagine the workload that was on these people.
I can also imagine that it was getting crowded down here in these tunnels.
It was very crowded. After Pearl Harbor, the crews were supposed to stay next to their guns, so they actually set up their bunks in either of these 2 passageways that are connected by this tunnel.
Now, this is a big shell, and this is what would have been fired from these big guns.
That's correct, Huell. This is a 14-inch shell. and it was designed to be fired out of the guns here at either Battery Osgood or Farley, the guns on either side.
And these, what is this up here? This is the pulley system that would have brought them out?
Well, as you can imagine, you can't load this by hand, okay? I mean, let me rephrase that. You have to load it by hand, but you've got to have some equipment to help you do it. There's no automated loading system whatsoever. So a group of men would be taking stacked shells from back here, loading them on the table. Each table, the table is sloped, the shell would roll down to these teeth. There was a guy standing on the opposite side there that would drop the lever. It would drop into a cart, and out he goes to the gun pit. Sort of like a bucket brigade when fighting fires.
And how many of these would they have had back in?
Probably at least a couple of hundred. Yeah, they weigh 1,500 pounds.
And how far out could they go?
Well, these guns, since they were designed fairly early on, didn't have as high of an elevation as you might think. So they'll only go about 14 miles.
14 miles out to sea.
That's right. And later, when they developed an elevation for a railway gun, you could get 23 miles out of these shells.
And to show just how big the barrel of these guns were, what are we looking at right here? Look how long this thing is right here. What is this thing?
Okay, Huell, this is the shell rammer. And what happened is you saw that big heavy shell. It took 8 guys equipped with this shell rammer to seat that shell in there by hand 6 feet into that gun breech.
It says here to load the gun, this 22-foot long rammer was used to push the 1,560-pound shell down into that.
That's right. And as soon as they do that, moments after that thing seats, the ramrod comes out. The powder comes in and replaces it. It's sitting on like a stretcher type device, and then the powder's in and they follow it again. And then they're out and the breech closes, primer's inserted, gun raised, and blammo. A good crew can do 1 round per minute.
Okay, we are finally above ground, and Steve, I'm just glad to be out in the sunlight again. We have come up on top of this big hill here, and this is a significant place right here.
Yes, that's correct. That's the battery commander's position, and that's what we call the eyes of the fort. So the eyes will see any target that's out there at sea, and they will communicate through speaking tubes and wired equipment down to the gun crews.
So they would have been down there looking out.
That's correct.
And look what they would have been communicating to over here. This is one of the old gun emplacements, and a big gun emplacement it is. Look how small the people look standing up on top of it.
That's right, Huell. You know, when you look at photographs, it's really hard to get the dimensions of this thing. This thing was enormous. The barrel was 50 feet long. When the explosion went off, it was 400 pounds of gunpowder behind that shell.
What a sound.
Unbelievable.
What a shock.
I have photographs that show the dirt being lifted up off of the ground.
Okay, so there would have been one gun looking right out to sea. There's sea right here. Look at this view. And another one over just right on the other side here, pointing out to sea. And what were they looking for, Steve?
When this gun position was built, Huell, the main threat was an enemy battleship called a dreadnought, a big, powerful battleship. These things were designed to do battle with a battleship.
Now that was in World War
I.
What was going on here during World War II?
Okay, in World War II, Huell, they used these same guns, but they augmented them with anti-aircraft positions. So they were still looking for ships, but they also had anti-aircraft positions because a new threat was the airplane. So they had searchlights and small flat guns throughout the entire hillside.
So there was a lot. These were considered critical locations for defense of the United States during World War II against ships, planes, submarines, you name it. That's what everybody was looking at and wanting to shoot at from this place.
That is correct. If you were not an Army member of the military, you better not be out in that water.
You're going to get shot at.
You're going to get shot at.
And now we're getting to it because, Steve, we are here not just to talk about Fort MacArthur in general. We are here to talk about the early morning hours of February the 25th, 1942. What happened here at Fort MacArthur and all over the LA area on the early morning hours of February 25th, 1942?
Well, Huell, you're right. That's what we're here to discuss. Unfortunately, we just don't know. We do know that Los Angeles was raided Okay.
There it is, the cover of the Los Angeles Times, LA area rated, Jap planes peril Santa Monica, Seal Beach, El Segundo, Redondo, Long Beach, Hermosa, and Signal Hill, and it says, roaring out of a brilliant moonlit western sky, foreign aircraft flying both in large formation and singly flew over Southern California early today. Now, did that actually happen? Were we raided by Japanese aircraft?
We don't know, Huell.
Well, wait a minute. There it is on the cover of the LA Times.
Well, you understand that this was wartime, and so anything that was up there might be considered Japanese.
And this was right after, just a month or two after, 2 months after Pearl Harbor, so everybody was edgy.
That is correct.
So we really don't know.
We don't know.
Well, now we're going to get to the bottom of this, because look what we've got right over here. You all were all here that morning. How many of you think that the Japanese raided Los Angeles that night? One lady.
I didn't really think it for sure, but it sure looked like it.
What did it look like?
Well, I lived in Whittier, and you could see it from there. We were in the house, my brothers and I. We were in the house, and we heard these guns going off, and we went out in the front, and here we saw these lights all to the sky, and we hear these guns, but we couldn't see what they were shooting at.
But you thought you were being attacked.
Yeah, we did.
Was it frightening? Was there's a lot of action here?
Well, I was at headquarters down on the main reservation at night, called out, and there were planes, I assume they were, in very close formation, and I could see the anti-aircraft fire, which only got 2/3 of the way up there. You could see the tracers, and they didn't get anywhere near it, and they sort of headed towards, San Diego or Mexico.
How many planes were there?
Well, I remember counting 6 or 8.
Were they Japanese planes?
I haven't the slightest idea. All they were was spots in the sky.
I personally didn't see the planes. I talked to the Navy afterwards, but I was up here at the Korean temple, and the base ring of a caliber 50 gun is still there, and the executive officer, Fort MacArthur, Lieutenant Colonel Snell, ordered me up here, and he says, fire! And I said, at what, sir? Fire! And I hope he's not living and mad at me, but there were no planes, and later on, there was a gun battery of the 203rd Coast Artillery, the Hound Dog outfit, that they were fooling around, and one of their guns accidentally went off. That started it.
So everybody was firing.
And Colonel Snell says, they're over there.
I was stationed in the Army at Seal Beach, and we all got out and watched it. We saw something, but it's nothing definite. Seemed to be something circling, slow around.
Well, what did you think it was? People really didn't know, did they? And that's what got everybody.
I was standing next to my commanding officer. He said, it looks like an airplane to me, but nobody seems to know, really.
Well, this is amazing.
There was a bunch of shrapnel, shell fragments all over Los Angeles County. And
yeah, we have some. Where's the shrapnel? Come on over here, John. Look, we have some pieces of shrapnel.
That's right. Picked up
because there was so much anti-aircraft fire.
Right.
It was showering Los Angeles, and there was more damage being done by the shrapnel falling than there was by this attack that really wasn't an attack.
One man sued the Army for damages to the fender on his car that was dented. Actually, there were casualties. 5 people in Los Angeles County died of a heart attack.
Just from the noise and being afraid.
Well, they were being afraid. And
Now, who else has got some stories? Yes, sir.
I was a radar operator at the Esplanade on Redondo Beach. We were called and told there was going to be a target coming in. Our radar had a range of 18 miles. We had to wait till that target got it within our range. We picked it up finally, and we turned the lights on it. It was a meteorologist balloon with a wavelength of wire tied to the balloon so that the radar would pick it up.
So you think that's what people were firing at, was a balloon?
I don't think they were firing at it. They were firing over this way, like this, over low. They weren't firing way up there. That thing was up there 30,000 feet. And that was the one that came in from up this area. I don't know about what went down here.
But from the headlines in the papers, people really thought that we were being attacked by the Japanese.
Absolutely.
absolutely.
The purpose of that raid and all the firing was to see how many saboteurs they could find around the area. That was the main purpose for it.
Okay.
I have a different idea on this thing.
Uh-oh.
And I was down here right at Fort MacArthur at the middle reservation. The sirens went off. We got dressed, went out, and we got all the lights going all over the place. A little bit of anti-aircraft fire far away, and this, I didn't realize it even this close to the middle reservation. There's one thing about all of this newspaper stuff. It isn't any different now than it was then. They jump on it and they put all of this fabrication in so they can sell the papers.
Blew it out of proportion.
On top of that, it would get the people riled up a little bit, and they'd say, oh, we got to do better on this war effort. And of course, that's it. But there were no planes. I didn't see a plane, and I was out there for an hour at least.
What did it sound like?
Terrible, absolutely terrible. The sirens started going, and so we knew it was an air raid. And my mother, I was a young girl living in Los Angeles. My mother was an air raid warden. So my brother and my mother and I went out on the front porch. The searchlights crisscrossed the sky. The flak or the shrapnel was falling. And I took one look at it and fainted dead away.
You're kidding.
I was so embarrassed for being such a wimp.
Well, you thought you were being attacked.
Well, of course.
This is some serious stuff here.
You bet.
I mean, this stuff is meant to destroy airplanes. It's also meant to kill people.
You bet. That's exactly what it's designed to do.
So what was the controversy? This must have been terribly controversial.
Well, it was, and you know, it was hushed up. There was a lot of quiet about it. I mean, this obviously isn't hushing, but
The front page of the paper.
But after this, there was pretty much there's no reports of it.
Because the Navy didn't want to take responsibility.
Army
They didn't
doesn't
want to
want
be
it.
embarrassed.
Navy
The
doesn't.
Army didn't want to
That's
be
right.
embarrassed. The
That's
Civil
right.
Defense didn't want to be embarrassed.
right.
The politicians didn't want to be
right.
embarrassed.
Right.
So really, it just kind of went away.
Yes, that's correct.
Definitely a farce. Absolutely.
farce.
A farce, absolutely.
So the whole thing, let's get that newspaper back up here. Come on over here. Steve, where's that other newspaper? We got one here, Guns Roar at L.A., another one, L.A. area raided, the front page of the Los Angeles Times. And what was the word you used for it?
I said it was a farce.
Or baloney. It just didn't happen. The planes were there, the lights were there, the guns fired, but that's all. Nobody hit anything.
So there's an example of one of the 3-inch gun shells that were fired that evening. How many of those were fired around here, Steve?
Well, those types and others, there were about 2,000 total.
2,000 of those went up in the air.
Yes, that's correct.
Over Los Angeles and all of Southern California, raining down shrapnel like rain. It was pouring down. And here are the people right here who were here that night for the air raid over LA, the Japanese attack that really never happened. Okay, time has passed. We are now standing out here on top of the hill at Fort MacArthur, where they would have been standing that day, February the 25th, 1942. We hear what we think is the sound of approaching enemy aircraft, correct?
That is correct, Huell.
All right, let's get these sirens going. We got a little one. We got a big one. The soldiers are going to disperse. There go the soldiers. And over here, on goes the searchlight. Now, Bob, this is your searchlight. Is this the way it would have been? Is this the kind of searchlight they would have had that night?
This may have been the searchlight they had that night.
You're kidding.
Oh, this is a 1942 General Electric searchlight, probably stationed along our coast to protect us from enemy aircraft.
All right, now what would you have been doing right now with the searchlight? That's a big searchlight.
My job is to keep coordinated with the sound locators. They're listening for aircraft. There's 2 meters that I have to keep pointing straight up. That controls my elevation and the azimuth. And hopefully I can spot an aircraft out there and the guns can shoot them down.
So you wouldn't just be aiming that up at the sky. You would have been coordinating this and they would have been telling you where to shoot.
Right, with their needles, with the 2 meters there.
All right, now what are they telling you right now? Where should you be going with this light?
Well, I have to center it and I'm looking around right now to see if I can find it.
Wow, look at that light.
And I think I found it up here.
Whoa!
There it is.
This.
So now we have to
Oh, look, it's a blimp! It's a blimp! And we got 2 searchlights are on it right now. Now you're just following this manually right now just by vision.
Yeah, I'm using my vision now. The guns can see it, and they're going to try to shoot it down.
Wow.
That's what happens. This is before they had radar, so the only way they could actually shoot at an aircraft is to see it. So we provided the light. We light them up for them.
Okay, now we're moving over to the second light. Joe, how bright are these lights?
These are 800 million candle power searchlights.
How far does the light go?
Well, you can actually read a newspaper by this light from about 5 miles away.
Really?
Yes, sir.
And they can probably be seen even further.
For much further. As a matter of fact, if the conditions are right, 35 to 45 miles.
Now, is this blinding that pilot up there right now?
It would, but we're keeping our best to keep it away from the cab. Rules and regulations don't allow us to really track an aircraft like they would have during the war.
But this would have been exactly the way it would have happened.
Absolutely,
right
exactly the way it would have happened.
And this would have been what got the civil defense and the Army people really excited if their light actually found something up in the sky.
Absolutely. At this point, you would make orders to ready the guns and start firing.
Now, John, let's get into this thing. What would have been happening right here at Fort MacArthur at that moment when the sirens started going and the lights came on?
Right now, we would have a lot of communications coming in, different orders, a lot of organized chaos, basically, Huell.
And how loud would the ordnance be with the firing of these anti-aircraft shells?
Oh, it would be a 4th of July times 100. That's the only way I can describe it.
Pop, pop,
oh,
pop.
yeah. Pop, 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 bap, 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 bap. Oh,
and
yeah.
This would have been going on not only here,
correct,
but at how many sites around Southern California?
Oh, all over. LA County, Orange County, Riverside County, this whole area.
All kind of at one time.
That's right.
Lights, sound.
Everywhere. Yeah.
How many guns are we talking about? 100? How many searchlights are we talking?
We're talking probably about 100 searchlights and probably 5 times as many cannons, anti-aircraft guns. I mean, you name it. The whole military inventory was aimed at the sky.
No wonder people got so swept up in this.
Right.
This is about the most interesting reenactment I have ever been a part of in my life. Thank you very much. Thank you, fellas. This has been great. I tell you what's interesting is that 60 years after February the 25th, 1942, the Japanese are flying over Los Angeles in a friendly Sanyo blimp.
There you go.
So they are here, and thank goodness the guns aren't firing tonight.
That's correct.
But this has been a wonderful reenactment of a part of Los Angeles World War II history that may have happened. Well, we know it happened, but we're not sure exactly what happened.
That's right.
But it was a very interesting part of our city's history.
Great. I'm so glad you came. I'm so glad you shared it with us.
It all happened right here in Fort MacArthur back on the early morning hours of February the 25th, 1942. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Huell, and I sure hope you enjoyed our look back at the 1942 Great L.A. Air Raid. If you'd like to go on this adventure again, or share it with family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy of it to your local school or library for historical purposes, of course, it's available on video cassette or on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.